Hi everybody. So this is our online course for class 21 where we're covering the second half of the chapter we started earlier in the week on motivation. And in this video lecture, it's actually one that I used for an online version of this class. So it might seem a little bit different. There might be a couple of odd segues, and that's because I cut and paste for our specific class to update it. And so I apologize for that in advance, but it's basically the same lecture that I would have given in class, just a little bit more condensed. As you go through this, there's going to be a couple of times where I ask you to pause and go do a forum on Moodle. It'll actually say to do module 6 because that's a remnant from the online class, but just go to our regular course page and do the forum under class 21. So in this lesson, we've already covered extrinsic and intrinsic motivation earlier in the week. We covered goals. We're going to be focusing on attributions and self-regulation.
Another big thing to think about is attribution theory. What happens when you don't reach your goal? And it's important to understand that attributions are a personal interpretation of what happened when a goal isn't met. Or actually, it relates to when a goal is met as well. So basically, how do you describe your successes and failures? And not everybody will agree with your attribution of something. And when we look at attribution theory, we're going to think about 3 characteristics to describe an attribution, whether it's internal or external, whether it's stable or unstable, and whether it's controllable or uncontrollable. So when we're thinking about internal versus external attributions, the success or failure is attributed to either something inside the child, that would be internal, or outside of the child, an external source. When we think about stable versus unstable, it's whether it's likely to continue in the future, so that would be stable, or whether it's highly variable or changeable, and that would be an unstable attribution. And then the third characteristic is controllable versus uncontrollable. So something that the child can do something about or can control versus something that's beyond their control and like it's dumb luck. At this point, I want you to pause the lecture. This is our first reflect and share activity. And on the Blackboard page for Module 6, I've included 3 different attribution scenarios. And I want you to think about how these different people are attributing their successes or failures along the 3 characteristics. Is it internal, external, stable, unstable, or controllable, uncontrollable? And you should have a description including all 3 of those characteristics. And think about the questions that are associated with this activity and post them on the forum. And we can look at developmental trends of attributions. We know, for example, that at a young age, children don't really distinguish between effort, ability, luck, or anything else that might be used to describe an attribution. But as they get older, they're going to increasingly distinguish among these. In the preschool age, around age 6, we're going to see them start linking ability and effort together. So for example, somebody's really good because they tried hard, so their ability and effort are the same thing, as well as effort and success. By the time we get to middle childhoods, around age 9, there's going to be an understanding that less ability you have, the more effort you need to accomplish something. So I'm not really good at something, but I could still do it if I try really hard. And then by middle school, around age 13, we're going to see that a little bit more nuanced view of this. If you have less effort, you still need to work harder, but sometimes you just can't accomplish it no matter what. So effort can't compensate for low ability all the time. So I know I'm not really good at something, but I still tried really hard and I didn't succeed. We also know that older children sometimes start to become aware of how others are going to react to their attributions, and they're actually going to tailor their attributions to the audience. So for example, if you fail, but it was out of your control, you might get a more sympathetic reaction. Oh, poor baby, I'm so sorry that happened to you. But if you failed and it was because you didn't try hard, they understand you might get a more angry reaction. Why didn't you study for your test? You could have gotten an A if only you had studied. We also know that children use this understanding to describe their attributions differently to adults and to peers. So for example, when they're talking to adults, they're going to start saying that it's uncontrollable attributions. Versus, in that way, they'll get that sympathetic response. Versus when they're talking with peers, we're going to see a difference in their attributions with age. In younger grades, we're going to see children starting to describe their successes as because they tried really hard. So they're going to value effort more, and their attributions are going to reflect that. Whereas we see this really interesting thing happen by the time kids get into middle school, where it's not cool anymore to work hard. And so they're going to start attributing successes to things other than hard work. So it might be an uncontrollable thing. Well, it was just a lucky guess that I got it right. Or it might be an external source that they're attributing to, like, oh, the teacher made the test really easy. And so their attributions really reflect who they're talking with as well as their values. And we know that as children get older, we're going to see them increasingly attribute successes and failures to uncontrollable characteristics. And we can think about two different views of ability here. This relates to the research of Carol Dweck, who wrote a popular book called The Mindset. And she talks about an incremental view of ability versus an entity view. And when we think about an incremental view, that's the idea that you can change your ability level with hard work and determination, versus an entity view is saying that you have all the abilities that you're born with and they're never going to change no matter what you do. And so you're just kind of stuck with it. And obviously when we're working with children, we want them to have more of an incremental view of ability because that gives them more opportunities to change their perspective as opposed to just feeling helpless with what they can do. And so when they have a more incremental view, they're going to value hard work and effort instead of just things like luck or their genetic traits. We can identify different patterns of attribution in people, and we can describe them as, for example, having a mastery orientation. People who have a mastery orientation tend to have an I can do it kind of attitude where their attributions are going to be more internally driven and understanding that their effort guides it. In contrast, we have learned helplessness. This is a view that says, I can't do it no matter what. And these people are going to see that they always need help or just won't be successful. And when we have somebody with a mastery orientation and somebody with learned helplessness doing the same the same task, and when they have equal ability, so all things being equal, the only thing different is their orientation, we're going to see them behave in different ways. So for example, you have two students who have the same aptitude at math, and one has a mastery orientation, one has a learned helplessness. The student who has a mastery orientation is going to behave in a way that leads them to be successful. So when they come to a challenging problem, they're going to try to tackle that problem. And in general, people with mastery orientations tend to set ambitious goals for themselves. They like challenge and they persist even when there's difficulties. In contrast, somebody who has learned helplessness, they tend to be less successful. So that same student, when they come across a hard problem on a math test, they might not try it. They might back away and just say, it's too hard, I can't do it. And so in general, people with learned helplessness tend to set easy goals that they know that they can achieve. They tend to avoid challenges and give up really easily. I just want to point out, this should say origins of attributes, not attitudes. I apologize for that typo on this slide. We know that attributes are based on previous successes and failures. We know that when children see themselves as successful in the past, then they are able to attribute their successes to internal factors. Well, I've always been successful, it just must be who I am. Whereas children who are unsuccessful in the past tend to feel like they have less control over something external. This is too hard. I'm set up for failure. And we also know that's somewhat based on other people's beliefs about their behavior. And these beliefs can be communicated either directly or indirectly. So when somebody approaches you and says, this is a really hard task, but I know you can do it, that's going to change your view of if you can do it, and when you're successful, how you attribute that success. Versus if you say, oof, this is really hard, I don't know if you can do it, it might be a little bit above your head, then if you succeed, that's going to change your attributes. And if you fail, you're going to be like, well, I just can't do it because I wasn't good enough. They told me I wasn't good enough.